Olay! Good morning. Do you need to be a good writer to be a good journalist? I know it sounds kind of oxymoronic. Good journalists have to be good writers, right? That's the whole point of journalism school. You go to learn how to write. I would argue, perhaps controversially, that's something I never am, in that, in point of fact, you do not need to be a particularly good writer to be a good journalist. And we can take this three different ways. Let's break it down a little bit like an atom. 3 parts: the electron, neutron, proton. So the first stage, I'm like Bill Clinton here. So the first stage is if you're just a journalism student, you're going to journalism school and you want to break in to kind of larger media industry, you do need to be able to write at least sufficiently well that it will get you a job. So what does that mean? Well, normally when you're going to journalism school, you're getting assignments from either your student newspaper or perhaps ideally a class that's assigning you to report on something. And in those instances, those will be your portfolio, your building blocks that you will use to get your first job in media. So in that sense, yes, your little portfolio that you use to get that first internship at Vogue or Vice, it needs to be somewhat legible and somewhat entertaining. I would put a higher quality factor on entertaining than some sort of deep, informative scoop when you're coming out of journalism school. Most media companies are looking for catchy headlines, kind of funny stories, entertaining. That's what they're going to look at more. They want to be, when you're hiring a new journalist at a media company, and believe me, I sat in many a room looking at resumes, honestly what happens is you read the first 1 or 2 paragraphs of a couple of their portfolio stories. And those couple first paragraphs are really getting judged on average by the people looking at your resume is whether they're entertaining, they're kind of funny, they're quirky, more than, oh, this was a very interesting, insightful scoop. That's not the expectation. So in that sense, yes, you need to be somewhat of a good writer. But that's, if you take the average person and you need to be this much above the average writer, which isn't actually saying that much because at least in the U.S. school system, we teach writing very poorly. The average student cannot write to save their lives. It's kind of the Dunning-Kruger effect. American students and assessing their writing abilities is one large example of the Dunning-Kruger effect. But I digress. Beyond that, once you get your first job, you will quickly note, as most people have, that what separates the good reporters from the rest of the pack is not so much their writing. Now, once again, I'm going to deal broadly. So that was, let's say, the electron part, getting the first job. The neutron part, the nucleus of the matter, is that indeed what's more important once you're working for a media company is getting scoops or breaking news stories. And in fact, perhaps the most famous American journalist, Bob Woodward, is not especially a very good writer. In fact, if I'm frank, he's pretty rubbish at writing. He's very dull and dour. But he's a very famous journalist. He broke the Watergate scoop. Many journalists are like this, and often you will get assigned stories by your editor, and it's how well you're able to come away walking away with new information, new insights, new scoops, and that's much more a game of networks, understanding the subjects, understanding where to find information, understanding where to look that others haven't, and that is an entirely separate set of skills than being able to write clearly and convey thoughts in a simple and efficient manner. That's important, but that's not really what's going to separate good reporters from the rest. Good reporters are the ones that are able to find information or find scoops, or the first ones to break stories. So they're fast, or they know to look in different areas, often because they have a certain network of people they built up around the country or around the industry that they work in, that they're able to lean on to get information first or to get a different side of the story. And that is ultimately more important, because if you have a piece of information that your colleagues do not, and reporting is a very competitive industry, even your own colleagues in some ways are your enemies. Nonetheless, you have a piece of information, a scoop. I know what the new iPhone 46 is going to look like. In fact, I have the blueprints right here. Does it really matter if you're able to write fantastically about the iPhone 46? No. Because what's going to happen is you're going to come back and you're going to talk to your editor and be like, I got this fantastic scoop. And you're going to write it up quick because you don't want anybody to beat you to that. And then your editor is going to promptly take whatever you've written and change 50% of it. They're going to clean it up. They're going to add their own flavor, their own idiosyncrasies, whatever they think will carry the article farther. And in fact, editors are kind of the best kept secret among the larger public that consumes news. Yes, we all hear about editors and the power of editors, but truly, the editor has a large hands on the pie of media. They control quite a bit of the flavor of each article or media morsel you're consuming. And so, ultimately, most things you submit, whether you're working in whatever beat and at whatever company, will go through an editor, and that editor will indeed edit what you are writing. And often, because it's going through revisions quickly, the information is more important than the words. And that's what separates the good reporters from the fine reporters. Now that's the bread and butter. Use those B's. Once again, this is the American school system where you don't learn elocution of words. That's the bread and butter of reporting, is information over quality of writing. Now there is another type of reporting. There's the kind of Jane Mayer or Caitlin Flanagan, Joan Didion, Hunter S. Thompson style of writing. There's less scoop-based and less morsels of information, little tidbits that you're picking up through your web of benign spies, and more a complex look at a nuanced topic. And that you have to spend quite a larger amount of energy, of kinetic energy to create a scene and characters that a reader can identify with and understand. And that does require high quality writing. But that is a much smaller and more select group of journalists. One, because that takes real skill and real practice. But two, once again, this is a mind kind of thing. Only certain types of people are really able to look at a situation or a story and then accurately convey that story in all its complexities. On top of that, the consumer appeal for these types of stories, the kind of long reads in the New Yorker. Yes, we all claim we love them, but how often do we actually read these 15-page long exposés in the Atlantic or the New Yorker? Not very often. And because of that, the amount of people doing this type of reporting, that kind of long expose work, is relatively small, and it's unlikely you'll be doing that. Also, you just don't get the action and the volatility of being a kind of DC Washington correspondent or out in Egypt breaking the scoop as they go into yet another revolution. So yes, there is some categories of journalism where high quality writing is demanded. But the bread and butter, when you're coming out of journalism school, beyond landing that first job, you will be judged on your scoops and your network of connections. And often when you're parlaying your skills as a journalist to get to, let's say you start at Advice, and then you move to Wall Street Journal, and then from the Wall Street Journal you move to New York Times. Each of these moves up the rungs of media elitism will be judged not so much on the quality of your writing, but the stories you broke, the volume of stories with new information or new insights, the amount of engagement each story drove. And often the engagement that story drove will not be off of, wow, those were fantastic sentences, but off the idea that you offered some sort of new information to the reader before anybody else did. Something to think about. I know this may be a controversial view or a perhaps depressing idea to those who really love writing, and I think you should hold on to your love of writing if you're in journalism school because you want to write. That is very important. But ultimately, writing well and being a good reporter are two separate skills. And once you get into the arena, you will quickly realize that even if you think you're writing fantastically, your editor will quash 50% of whatever you write anyway. Anyway, if you found this interesting or insightful, like, subscribe for more daily journalism videos. Thanks for watching, guys. See you tomorrow. Bye.